like.
For an
So I
investigation
happen
in
to like.
exchange
Yeah,
for
that's right. And
weapons.
I was totally exonerated, by the way. Just a waste of time and money.
You were impeached over that. You
I
were
was
impeached over that. But let's stay on topic here, Mr. President, because the question is, would you give Ukraine weapons
I was
and funding?
impeached by a crazy woman named Nancy Pelosi.
But the question here is, would you give Ukraine weapons and funding if you were elected?
I would sit down. Let me just put it a nicer way. If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in one day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over. It'll be absolutely over.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people and breaking down this country. Now,
can I just follow up on that? You said you don't think in terms of winning and losing. Mr. President, can I just follow up on that because that's a really important statement that you just made there. Can you say if you want Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying. They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying. And I'll have that done.
It was every bit as beautiful as I imagined and hoped for. It was amazing. The boss man went right to work on CNN's annoying little valley girl like a ballot stuffer on election night. And he did it so nonchalantly, so naturally, so instinctively, it was vintage, pure Orange Man. Flashbacks of 16 all night long. And of course they had to put Caitlin Collins out there. And wasn't she every sadly funny blue-haired meme? Every video clip of an outraged, crying, screaming, privileged coastal Ivy League liberal arts major we've seen over the last 10 years rolled into one? My God, thank you. Thank you, CNN, thank you so much. That was, hands down, the best political snap-your-ass-back-into-reality check since, I don't even know, the day he won, probably? And I have to mention, not for nothing, but how many little Trump-light Ron DeSantis fans do you think came scurrying back that night? Seriously, that was the guy I lost my first damn channel over. So impressive all night, so take no shit, so honest, and in your face, with zero fucks given. So refreshing all night long to the point of them stopping the damn town hall 20 minutes early. I think because they were scared for that little heifer Caitlin's health. Because, folks, the Donald was murdering her ass all night long. Okay, let's do one more soundbite, and we'll start the actual video.
I told him he couldn't do it. And Mike said to me, I can't do it. The lawyers told me you can't do it. They can't do it. But the lawyers were wrong. Because right after the election, they all met, the rhinos and the Democrats, and they worked out a plan to make sure that future vice presidents don't do what I said you could do.
That's not what happened. You're referring to the Electoral Count Act. I've read that. There is no authority.
No,
legal experts, including Republican legal experts, say that he does not have that authority, Mr. President. But I want to move on.
Why did they change the law then, saying that you can't do it?
They didn't change the law. They strengthened the law because they were worried about presidents exploiting.
They strengthened it, meaning you could do it. Thank you.
That's not what it means.
Thank you.
They strengthened the law because they were worried.
Mike had the right to do it. They convinced him he didn't, and it was a horrible thing for our country. If you would have sent those votes back to Georgia, Pennsylvania, and other states, Wisconsin, which if you look at Wisconsin, they virtually admitted now that the election was rigged. If you would have sent those votes back to many of those states, they would not come back in the affirmative. And remember what I said, and you just said it pretty much, you admitted what I said was right. They said he didn't have the right to do it. And he did have the right to do it, and that's why they changed the law, taking that right away.
I should note that your campaign paid for a recount that happened in Wisconsin. It actually had more votes for President Biden by the end of it.
So, despite an audience that was friendly to the candidate, CNN's recent town hall hosting the Donald was anything but an effort to inform independent and Republican voters about the candidate's position on the substantial issues facing many struggling Americans. Really, this was a hedonistic exercise to satiate its left-wing producers. They'll claim it's for the viewers, but the viewers are on their priority list somewhere, back behind the building, over behind the smelly dumpsters. Anyways, this was about desire to emphasize all the criticisms that CNN talking heads have been levying against the Donald since 2020. Funny thing, though, CNN certainly didn't expect that Trump would simply concede to all the nonsense that they've been unsuccessfully peddling to Americans these past few years. I mean, it's fairly safe to assume that he wasn't going to say that he's really sorry for purposefully stoking an insurrection that was worse than 9/11. Or that he'd suddenly come to the realization that the 2020 election was all on the up and up, or that despite the worst inflation in decades, a massive invasion of aliens illegally crossing our border, and the planet being on the brink of World War III, his successor is actually doing a bang-up job in that White House. And in fact, he is of completely solid mind and body. No, but really, CNN brass got exactly what they expected, which was peak ratings. As a medium for information delivery, cable news is clearly dying. But for a brief moment, for one shiny moment, do you remember that in the 90s, that song? The NCAA would play it during the tournament. One shiny moment. The video was like 5 minutes long, and it was nothing but athletes on the sidelines crying their eyes out. And all I could think of was, shut up and go to the NBA and make your millions. Anyways, for one brief moment, CNN got to feel like Fox News felt nightly in the Tucker Carlson hour of prime time. Over 3 million Americans tuned in to watch Trump do what Trump has always done, which is to defend himself against hostile corporate-worshipping propagandists. Most of them tuned in to be entertained, and they weren't disappointed. But of course, there was a minority among the audience, including several talking heads with the network, that were furious that CNN even allowed the spectacle to take place. How dare you host a town hall for the Republican presidential frontrunner, they fumed. After all, people might hear what he has to say. His evil powers will then suck you into a world that actually makes sense. We can't have that, people. We can't have that. Now, they're right to be worried about people hearing what Trump has to say, but not for the reasons that they try to sell 24/7, 365 days a year. They'd have you believe that they once imagined or played to imagine that they were righteously defending the truth against a radical fringe minority. That fantasy has now tumbled like a house of cards. An absolutely devastated Anderson Cooper tells his audience that it was, quote, indeed disturbing, that Trump was given a platform to, quote, answer questions, only to proceed to tell lie after lie after lie. And it was, quote, certainly disturbing to hear that audience, young and old, people who love their kids and go to church, laugh and applaud his lies, unquote. And he continued, quote, but here's what I also get. The man you were so disturbed to hear from last night, that man is the frontrunner for the Republican nomination for president. And according to polling, no other Republican is even close. And that man you were so upset to hear from last night, he may be president of the United States in less than 2 years. And that audience that upset you, that's a sampling of about half of the country. They are your family members and your neighbors. And they are voting. And many said they're voting for him, unquote. Just 2 months ago, Anderson Cooper's show occupied the 8 p.m. CNN time slot in which the Trump Town Hall appeared. It garnered, on average, in its first week, 584,000 viewers. It's safe to say that he's not speaking to, quote, MAGA Republicans, as Trump supporters are frequently called in an effort to make them seem like fringe radicals. No, he's specifically speaking to his audience, which we can safely assume is the minority among the 3.1 million people who tuned in to watch that town hall. You see, he and his viewers are members of a sect of left-wing elitists who are so ensconced in their gated communities and left-wing echo chambers that they believe that it could only be a fringe minority of Americans that refuse to understand that Biden rescued the economy from Trump's disastrous policies. Or that only racists and xenophobes could see any problem with the unprecedented invasion by foreign nationals occurring at our southern borders, or that the average American could have any questions about the legitimacy of the 2020 election. I mean, come on. One can really hardly blame Anderson Cooper for imagining that he represents some obviously righteous majority. He has lots of money and influence and represents the status quo after all, right? The unelected politburos of the American government, media, academia, and corporations are all of the left, and they are staunchly anti-Trump. They spend ample amounts of time, energy, and money telling Americans to see things their way, and have, as of late, spent even more energy seeking to silence anyone trying to tell Americans anything differently. Anderson Cooper sadly informs his audience that it's not actually a small minority of Americans that refuse to accept all the bad things CNN and co. are saying about Trump, but, quote, about half of Americans are actually in that camp. And boy, oh boy, folks, if they're sad to hear all that, they really won't like to hear the truth about how Americans really feel about the narratives that CNN's been peddling. First of all, there's the economy. Energy is the lifeblood of any industrial power. And just 2 years into the Trump presidency, America was energy independent. Now, you hear that a lot, but let's emphasize on why that's so damned important. You see, that might not mean much to young people, but it was once an impossible dream for America. We didn't even speak of it because it was too outlandish of a goal. Pretty much with the exception of Reagan, every president going back to Richard Nixon imposed an anti-oil stance, believe it or not. Trump was a, quote, radical departure from 50 years of received energy wisdom, unquote, wrote Investor's Business Daily in 2018. He told Americans that for decades the myth of energy scarcity was peddled. Here's more from the Business Daily article, quote, what the country needs, he said, isn't alternative energy or new austerity measures. It's a government that promotes energy development. Trump listed actions he was taking to lift federal impediments to energy production. Lo and behold, Trump was right, unquote. Within 2 years of his inauguration, Trump had done the unthinkable. We were energy independent, and the economy was booming. Then, as if it were a purposeful effort to be the exact inverse of that success, Biden's first action was to kill the Keystone XL pipeline while issuing a moratorium on oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters, which are the source of roughly 25% of U.S. production. Coupled with inflation, which, if we are honest, was perhaps inevitable after COVID intervention, but was certainly exacerbated by the out-of-control spending supported and signed by elder ass-clown Joe Biden. Yet it wasn't even 2 years after this idiot's inauguration that U.S. energy prices rose at a higher rate than they had in 41-plus years. Reality is most Americans care less about Trump's mean comments than being able to afford the cost of daily living. Also, in 2022, we saw that it wasn't just half of Americans, but a full 70% of Americans that believe that our government should encourage increased energy production to reduce our dependence upon foreign countries. So, what about illegal immigration over there on CNN? Any attempts to frame what is occurring at the southern border as an invasion would surely earn at least a few accusations of racism or xenophobia, right? Yet over half of Americans openly frame it as an invasion. 27% of Americans would not say one way or the other in response to that loaded question, and only 19% would say that we are absolutely not being invaded through our southern border. Did you catch that? Did you get it? Because CNN sure as hell hasn't. Only 1 in 5 Americans are willing to openly attest that we are not being invaded by foreign nationals across our southern border. 1 in 5. Not 5 out of 5. Anderson Cooper. As Trump-era Title 42 ended, unprecedented waves of foreign nationals stood ready to break our laws and enter this country. It is Biden's decision to rescind Trump's policies that are driving this outcome, and well over half of Americans do not approve of it. But it's left-wing commentary around the 2020 election that is most fascinating. Pundits like Anderson Cooper speak about it as if only kooks at the local Elks Lodge would be raving about a rigged election. But because Cooper and co. live in a left-wing bubble, they don't understand the skepticism around the election is far more pervasive than that. First of all, you don't have to believe that voting machines were hacked, or that millions of fraudulent ballots were collected and counted to come to the opinion intuitively that the election was rigged. The very best example as to how that happened was delivered by a pro-Biden conspirator at Time magazine, Molly Ball, who speaks of how a, quote, shadow campaign saved the 2020 election. Quote, "The participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a fever dream. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies, working together behind the scenes to influence participants, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information," unquote. Once again, that was written by Time Magazine's Molly Ball and has absolutely nothing to do with CR's Safe Space. Now, I'm certainly not sure that her confession was necessary, but the American people believe her. According to a poll observed in late 2020, 40% of Americans believe the election was rigged or stolen. Of note, only 36% disagree or would say that it wasn't rigged or stolen. The remainder say that they, quote, "neither agree nor disagree or didn't know," unquote. Now that's hardly a consensus against the rigged election theory, now is it? And when you look deeper, it gets more telling. Of the 36% who disagree that the election was rigged or stolen, 1 in 3 find it understandable that others would think it was. So what that really means is that only 1 in 4 Americans agree that the 2020 election was absolutely honest and fair. The remaining 3 in 4 Americans either believe it was rigged and stolen, or could understand how someone might think it was, or they don't know and or simply refuse to answer the question. So to fully wrap this up and put a bow on it, for every one American who is as confident as Anderson Cooper that Joe Biden was constitutionally elected without any shenanigans at all, there are 3 other Americans who either disagree or they aren't so sure about that claim. You see, Cooper really embodies that anger and sadness among progressives in learning that fact, having just recently discovered that as many as half of Americans somehow disagree with the standard CNN talking points that he espouses every single damn night. Imagine their chagrin in discovering that they are now a smaller fringe minority than they once believed Trump supporters to be. Poor Anderson Cooper. Well, that's about it for that one. Most of this came by way of the American Thinker. If you liked it, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everyone for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time.
Come on, move. Move. Easy, easy.